Friends, good evening. I'm going to invite you to take your seats. We're going to get started. I want to welcome you to Park Avenue Synagogue, those who are here in person. To those who are joining us through the live stream, we welcome you. We wish you a Shabbat Shalom. I hope everyone had a wonderful Thanksgiving. I'm joined on the Bima by Rabbi Fein. I'm going to introduce Leah in just a moment. The topic this evening is an opportunity to check in with what's happening on the college campus from the perspective of a Hillel professional. And it's nice to have some college students in the room. We may turn to you at some point, probably, most definitely, and ask you either for questions or some reflections with your experiences over the last 6-7 weeks since October 7th. Rabbi Fein is let's see, I got to skip down in your bio here. She is the Senior Director of Engagement at Columbia Barnard Hillel before joining the Hillel team in 2019. Rabbi Fein worked at Syracuse Hillel first as campus rabbi, then as interim executive director. Rabbi Leah's leadership in Syracuse helped transform Syracuse Hillel, which earned Hillel International's Outstanding Campus Award in 2019. Ordained and receiving a master's in Jewish education from the Jewish Theological Seminary. She was awarded the Pomerantz Prize in Congregational Education. Most important on her resume is that during rabbinical school, Rabbi Fein interned here at Park Avenue Synagogue in New York, Sinai Temple in LA, and the Metropolitan Jewish Health System hospice residence in the Bronx, completing a unit of clinical pastoral education through JTS. Lots to say. Counselor at Camp Ramon, California, living and learning at Hebrew U, the Schechter Institute. You live in the Northwoods of, you don't live in the Northwoods of Central Park. You like to, I'm only saying it because you talk about your baby and your dog. Oh. Right? So I had to get that in there. It is a pleasure, Rabbi. Can we be Leah and, yeah? Okay, great. It's a pleasure, Leah, to welcome you to the Bima, or I should say back to the Bima, and it's great to see you. So before we even get into what's been happening since October 7th, tell me a little bit about Columbia Barnard Hillel and the work that you do there.
Absolutely, and first of all, thank you so much for having me. It's great to be here back at Park Avenue Synagogue. Feels like I'm back home, so very happy to be here. I have been at Columbia Barnard Hillel. This is my 5th year. I'm currently the Senior Director of Engagement, which means that most of my time I actually spend outside of the Craft Center, outside of our Hillel building, on campus, building relationships with all sorts of Jewish students. Mostly the students I engage with are students who came to Columbia or came to Barnard, and maybe they didn't expect to get involved in Jewish life at all. And now they're in college, they have every opportunity ahead of them, and they're exploring what it means to be a Jewish adult, what it means to discover Jewish life for oneself, and what Judaism could potentially bring to their life specifically as a college student. So for me, what that looks like is a lot of one-on-ones with students, usually over coffee or smoothies somewhere in the Morningside Heights neighborhood. I do a bunch of fellowships, a lot of learning opportunities, and different kinds of Shabbat and holiday celebrations in the building and also all over campus. But really the foundation for my work and our entire team, I'm very lucky to work with a large, fantastic team of professionals. And really the foundation of our work is engagement, by which I mean building relationships, really getting to know students, what somebody cares about, what somebody is afraid of, what somebody hopes for during their time in college and also in the future, so that we can really connect people to the right next step specifically for them in their Jewish journey. And we always have a lot going on. We're lucky to have a large building on 115th Street, which is usually packed, which is very exciting. So a lot of vibrant, exciting things happening with Jewish life at Columbia and Barnard.
It's extraordinary. I know firsthand because I have a daughter at Barnard, and I remember moving in during COVID when we were stationed outside the gates of Barnard in little like chalked areas, and the Hillel professionals were out in force,
Yes.
right?
On Broadway.
On Broadway, and getting us into Hillel for a free lunch that day, and it's just an extraordinary group of professionals, and thank you for all that you do, because it actually is very personal for me.
Also lay leaders, our board chair, Stephanie Katz-Rothman, is here.
It's good to see you, Stephanie. So I want to just talk about October 7th and the aftermath. I don't need to go through the full litany of things that has been happening on college campuses, but maybe I want to highlight a couple. I want to talk about a poll that Hillel did about the feelings of college students, and then talk a little bit about how we got here and how Hillel is responding to really an historic moment, I think, on campus. So just a few things here. Many of us have seen these at Cooper Union College in New York City. Jewish students had to shelter in the library as pro-Palestinian protesters banged on doors, chanted anti-Semitic slogans. At UMass Amherst, a Jewish student was punched in the face while holding an Israeli flag. A professor at UC Davis made online threats of violence against Zionist journalists, saying that they have kids with addresses. The university is investigating, but to date has not taken any action. It goes on and on. I mean, you get the idea. So a poll was done. The key findings of the polls, I'm just going to give you a few. Jews on campus are deeply impacted by the attack on Israel and the war. More than 4 out of every 5 Jewish students, 84%, say the situation in Israel and Gaza is affecting them. Jewish students are needing to hide their identity. More than 1 in 3 Jewish students, 37%, say they have needed to hide their identity, their Jewish identity. Jewish students are victims of hate and violence on campus. 1 in 3 Jews, 35%, say there have been acts of hate or violence on campus against Jews. A majority are, I didn't give the exact number, but a majority are unsatisfied with their university's response to those incidents. And perhaps for the work that you do and that we do, one of the most important findings is that Hillel and Jewish spaces on campus are more important than ever. 4 out of 5 Jewish students say that Jewish spaces are more important than ever before. So, Rabbi, help us understand, in the aftermath of October 7th, how did we get here to the place where October 7th happened and the veil is just ripped off and we experience the number of incidents and just general the fire on some of these campuses?
I think that's a question we're still trying to figure out in many ways. Columbia in particular has always been a very politically active campus, so in many ways it wasn't surprising to see so much political activity, so many protests and rallies and things like that, because that is part and parcel of the Columbia experience and the Columbia campus. What has been surprising is that it hasn't stopped. It has been every single day. And also, I'm just speaking obviously about the Columbia and Barnard campus. That's the frame with which I'm able to view this. I know every campus is different. Every student is also experiencing things very differently, no matter what campus we're on. But just holistically, we are already situated on a very charged campus. And we are also wondering how this has become sort of that linchpin that really has galvanized so many students who might have not thought about Israel before this, might not have thought about Gaza before this, and all of a sudden care enough to be showing up at these rallies, showing up at these protests, posting on their social media stories nonstop. I don't know if folks here are on SideChat or have heard of SideChat, or if SideChat is at every university. I have no idea. SideChat is an app that many Columbia students have. You log in with your Columbia email address, and it's a place to anonymously post anything you want to say. So you can only imagine what's happening there as well.
Do you see SideChat at all, or is it just students?
I've seen screenshots. I've heard that you can get on with a Columbia email address. I have not done that. I've also personally deleted all of my social media accounts. I am not using social media at all right now. It doesn't feel like a healthy space for me. But a lot of students are on it and have been sending us screenshots of what they've been seeing.
So you talked about your own, the way you're taking care of yourself. tell us briefly a little bit about what life has been for you since October 7th, because there are lots of front lines of this fight, right? And you are and any Hillel employee is on a front line right now. So how are you doing since October 7th?
So for me personally, I came back to work from maternity leave on October 9th. And like I said, most of my work is meeting one-on-one with Jewish students on campus, really getting to know people, and of course, especially in this time, being there as a support. And many of those first one-on-ones that week were with students who had loved ones who were directly affected by what had happened on October 7th. Students who were wondering where their cousins were, students who were wondering what happened to one of their best friends or have heard bad news about a close friend. And so for me, especially that first week, was a lot of grief. And sitting with students in that grief. And I think that's also part of what was very challenging that week, was to hear on campus the Free Palestine chants while I was sitting with students who were crying because they had lost people they loved so much.
Right, and this was early. This is really before any offensive by the Israeli army.
Exactly.
Right. So I want to come back to, in a minute, I want to come back to the response of Hillel. I mean, obviously one of the responses is sitting pastorally with students. But before that, for years, people would talk about campus, and as you point out correctly, and we probably have many different campuses represented here, some campuses are worse than others, more on fire than others. But oftentimes, in the years leading up to this, you would hear things, and people on campus would say, well, I mean, it's not really that bad on campus. Or, you're only getting you're only seeing you're zooming in on a situation. In your view, and not just on Columbia Barnard, but obviously you're in touch with other Hillel directors, is it as bad as it looks on campus right now from the outside?
So I am in touch with other rabbis, Jewish professionals on other campuses, and I know our executive director, Brian Cohen, is in touch with so many other executive directors as well, and others on our staff continue to be in touch. And I will also say, I was one of those people who, when I started working at Columbia Barnard Hillel, so many people said to me, why do you want to work at a place with so much anti-Semitism, so much anti-Israel sentiment? And I said, you have no idea the vibrant Jewish life on this campus. You have no idea how strong this community is. I love going to work every day. I truly, truly love it. The students are amazing. We are able to offer so many ways to engage with Jewish life that I never could have dreamed up even 5 years ago. And I continue to be so proud of what we're doing. And I think I was one of those people who I knew it was there. There was something under the surface, but it didn't seem like the dominant sentiment. And what I had heard from students over the years was that if you are in student government, that is certainly a place where you will encounter anti-Semitism, a lot of anti-Israel sentiment. It will happen in classes sometimes, but for the most part, if you want to be outside of that, you actually can be outside of that. And now I'm hearing from more and more students that it's a lot harder to be outside of that because of what they're seeing on friends' social medias, what they are hearing friends talking about in the library or in their classes or in their club meetings.
Right. Or in my daughter's case, she used an example of standing at a rally, a pro-Palestinian rally, where they're chanting Intifada and River to the Sea and et cetera, and she's like, the guy up on stage is like in her Greek class.
Yeah.
Right? So how do you? Right?
Exactly.
It's a odd sort of experience to, it's not just that the government of Israel is being protested against. It's the chants of death to Israel, river to the sea, all of or genocide, right? All of those things are creating a very hostile environment.
And because of where those are taking place, you can hear it from anywhere on
Correct.
campus. And so you can be sitting in your dorm room or sitting in the library, and that's what you're hearing.
Right. So, like many institutions, synagogues, I assume Hillel's pivoted after October 7th. Can you talk a little bit about how you are supporting students beyond, and I'm not minimizing, I think the pastoral piece is huge for students right now, but there's also, as you said, the students who are sort of coming to the Zionist case, or even open to expanding their Jewish identities in ways they may not have been before, because Hillel is, as it said in the poll I quoted, a safe space. Mm-hmm. So what is Hillel doing now to respond to students' needs, in addition to the pastoral piece and the things that you mentioned?
Yeah, our associate director, Shana Zients, immediately organized for social workers and therapists to come to the Craft Center and have open office hours. The counseling center, as you can imagine, has been inundated with appointments, and it's been hard for students to get appointments there, and so we prioritize the mental health of students and the physical safety of students as well, making sure that the spaces at the Craft Center are spaces that people can actually genuinely feel safe. We also have done little things like anytime we hear there is going to be a protest on campus, we'll just get a ton of pizza and have pizza out on the second floor. And it's not an event. It's not advertised as, instead of going there, you can come here. It's just open in case people want another space to be in that's away from everything else. We also, in many ways, have been business as usual. We have Shabbat dinners that happen every single week that are free and open to everybody. We're continuing our fellowships, Jewish learning opportunities, many more speakers around Israel specifically, because that's what people are interested in right now. We're continuing all of the different kinds of social opportunities. We're still planning the big Hanukkah party and all of that. And so it has been a balance. And then it feels like we've also just enhanced what we were doing before in many ways, particularly on the engagement front. After October 7th, every single person on staff reached out to every single student we knew, whether it was a text or an email. Every student we knew got a personal check-in just to make sure that people were doing okay.
Does that piece of information from the survey resonate for you? Have you seen an increased volume of students coming through Hillel?
I have seen an increased volume of students coming through Hillel. I even reached out to students who I met once in a coffee shop. We barely had a conversation, but we kind of recognize each other, or we met once at Shabbat dinner or something like that. And I got so many people responding to me, asking if we could meet up, people who would never have wanted to do that before. One student called me and said, I actually walked outside the Craft Center yesterday, and I was way too intimidated to walk in because I've never been inside before. Never occurred to me to walk inside before, and now I feel like I need it, and I don't know where to go. So I invited him to the Craft Center, and I took him on a tour, and I introduced him to people so that he could feel comfortable there. And I've also had situations where I'll meet up with a student for coffee and they'll bring one or two friends now, which didn't really happen before, but friends who feel like they need somebody to talk to about what's going on. I will also say, in my specific case, the opposite has also been happening. Jewish students who I had relationships with do not resonate with the pro-Israel stance that Hillel is taking and with those Zionist values. And so there are some people who I also haven't seen in a long time.
And is your sense that they're finding connections through different places? I mean, where have they just disappeared from the Hillel scene completely? Are they gravitating towards groups that are more open to sort of a less pro-Israel point of view?
The truth is I don't know because I haven't been able to talk to them, so I imagine probably, but I don't know for sure.
Yeah. So Columbia Barnard is, as you said before, it's extraordinary because as many people who would have told you, quoting you, not to go, why would you go to such a politically charged environment? It's extraordinary, right?
Yeah.
I mean, the number of kids who identify actively as Jews, number of observant kids, by any metrics, it's an incredibly rich Jewish environment. And as a result of this uptick in anti-Semitism and all the anti-Israel things, as you said, there's been an increase in programming and, connecting to Jewish identity. We'll take them any way we can get them, right? But at the same time, I know because you and I have spoken about this, we want kids not just to identify negatively with their Jewish identity, meaning I'm Jewish because I am a victim of anti-Semitism, or outside my dorm regularly they're calling for intifada, but we want kids to celebrate Jewish joy, right? So talk to us a little bit about finding that balance, right? As you said, it's sort of business as usual, but right, we've got a window here with a lot of kids. I mean, it's no different here. On Friday nights, there are 400 people coming to synagogue. So how do we capture that joy that we feel and not just showing up because times are tough for the Jewish people?
And that was really the priority since my first day back on October 9th. That's what we as a staff were talking about. How do we make sure to still embrace Jewish joy while also holding space for all of these other things going on with the war and going on campus? One of the big things that we're doing, we're actually hosting a huge Shabbat dinner for all of the Columbia affiliates in the room. We're hosting a big Shabbat dinner called Shabbat Together on December 1st. We're expecting 1,000 people. It's going to be hosted in the gym at Columbia. And the tagline is embracing Jewish joy. It was really important to us to create an opportunity where people could come together over Shabbat dinner and just celebrate Shabbat together and embrace Jewish joy together and connect and be with one another and relax and do all of the things that you love to do at Shabbat dinner and enjoy this delicious meal with people you care about. And we're hoping that it's also a way for students to invite friends who are not Jewish to be part of that celebration of Jewish joy. I think right now it's really easy to retreat back into, just those Jewish friendships or relationships or spaces or connections. And it also feels important to maintain those friendships and relationships with people who aren't Jewish and with clubs that aren't solely around, Jewish life and culture, so that we can make sure to, celebrate with more than just our own community, as strong as it is. We really are stronger when we have so many more allies and friends with us too.
Any other great initiatives, anything that the Jewish, I want to stick on this Jewish joy thing, right?
Because right. So that's our big one coming up. Another piece of Jewish joy specifically, for us, a lot of it is around Shabbat dinner, only because on Friday nights, usually students, nobody has class, people are really available to come together. And on Friday at Columbia, most people don't have class also, so we do a lot of different kinds of programming at Hillel on Fridays, also throughout the week. And there was one Friday recently when two people who were at the Nova Music Festival who survived the massacre at the Nova Music Festival came to speak. And they spoke downstairs in our big auditorium downstairs in the Hillel building. Right after that, we had a meeting for our engagement fellows, who are a team of Jewish students who engage their peers in Jewish life on campus and are that bridge for their peers, connecting them to Jewish life and Jewish joy. Right after that, Challah for Hunger was baking challahs in the same exact room and packaging them up to be able to sell and distribute all over campus. And then after that, there was Kabbalat Shabbat services and Mariv in the same room. And then the room got turned over again for Shabbat dinner. There was a table at Shabbat dinner that was open and set for the hostages, much like what's being done all over the world. And after Shabbat dinner, people were staying and singing. And so I was in that room for many hours that day. And we were talking to students about how one room and one space could hold all of that. Yeah. And it seemed like the perfect metaphor for what we all were experiencing, holding so many different things at once, and that the joy doesn't need to come at the expense of the grief, that we can actually hold both of those things at the same time.
That's beautiful. I want to shift gears and maybe open it up to some of our students here, because one of the things I think that the clergy have been dealing a lot with here, as I assume you are, is in people's respective schools. For us, it's often in the ongoing primary private schools of New York City, where the response of the schools was less than we would have hoped for, either in condemning the terrorism or not having the sort of moral clarity that we would have liked to have seen. And I have either spoken to parents or in several cases spoken to students, including college students, who are struggling with this and are feeling unsafe and want to speak to their administration about what's happening and how they might be better allies to the Jewish students. I assume, I think many of us know the answer to this question, but what has Columbia's response been, and how has the Hillel community felt about Columbia's response regarding October 7th, and how are you helping, beyond the pastoral piece of kids who have friends or former camp counselors or madrichim on Israel trips who have been impacted directly by this? The other layer is these kids are speaking to administrations. What are you telling kids regarding that? So A, what's happening on Columbia with the response? B, how are you helping kids kind of navigate their professors, administrators, deans, et cetera?
So we haven't seen so much response from the university yet. Our executive director, Brian Cohen, is advocating around the clock, and he's really the one who works so closely with students in how to talk to their deans about what's going on. We always encourage students to take screenshots if you are seeing anything on social media and an email, write down incidents or take photos of what you're seeing if you think that something could potentially be problematic, submitting it to one's dean. And really, we are encouraging students to advocate for yourself as much as possible, which is an important life skill in general, and even more important right now. So I know Brian is doing a lot of advocacy work on that front with different administrators at the university. And one thing that I think has been really lovely that I've heard a lot of students have appreciated is that several administrators from Columbia and Barnard have come to Shabbat dinner at the Craft Center. So every week, we have not yet had a Shabbat dinner since October 7th that didn't have an administrator who was there sitting with students. And that table that the administrator is sitting at with students has every single week been the last one to leave. And the very first week, the Barnard president, for example, came and sat with a table of Barnard students and really listened.
Well, the Barnard president wrote a great letter. That was, strong.
And I really do think that it's in no small part because she actually was listening to what students were saying and was sitting with students. And that is also something that Brian has been working on in terms of advocacy towards the university, making sure that administrators really hear from students firsthand, hear what they're going through in their stories.
And I want to come back and then I want to open it up. This side chat thing, anonymous, I have to believe that this is like a sewer of,
the worst that you can imagine.
Are kids signing off of that? Are they engaging with, right, what do they do? I just can't imagine when people have the opportunity to post anonymously.
Exactly.
Right? And that side chat continues. The university's not shutting side chat down.
Not that I've heard.
Okay. All right.
I can only hope.
Yeah, exactly. Let's open it up. First of all, I would love to either hear directly, and Ross has microphones. I would love to hear either directly from students on campus, if you want to share any experiences you've had, or if you have direct questions for Rabbi Fein. I think one of the things we didn't talk about, and hopefully will come up in some of this Q&A, is your responsibility isn't just to the students, right? You're also working with parents who are looking for resources, and I know that that's been part of the mission of Hillel as well. So let's open it up. Any questions, comments, thoughts, shared experiences? Let's go up in the front here, and if you wouldn't mind saying your name and where you are on campus, that would be great. And stand up, please, Benjamin.
My name is Ben Rothman. I'm a sophomore at Columbia. I was going to comment on side chat from my personal experience, because it's something that I sometimes will used to or still do scroll when I'm bored or taking a break from homework. I would say that I wouldn't describe it necessarily as a cesspool of anti-Semitism. I think that to shut it down would be an infringement upon many, I would say stuff that I would genuinely consider hate speech. There are people, both pro-Israel and, people who are shakier on Zionism who will jump to combat that anti-Semitism. And even though it's all anonymous, it all doesn't really matter in the end. I would say you could either interpret that hate speech as a problem, you could rightfully interpret it as a problem, but also admire that there is still a community coming together to combat anti-Semitism in these anonymous spaces. I've also talked to people who have they've spent maybe useless hours going through and posting things that are in support of Israel on side chat, and I don't know. So that's the students' take on side chat.
I appreciate that. Thank you, Ben. I was speaking with a Hillel professional last week in a completely different context, and he was telling me that he tries to help students discern between feeling uncomfortable versus feeling unsafe, right? And when does some of that language or activity on campus, I don't mind necessarily, I wish students didn't have to feel uncomfortable, but students could feel uncomfortable in any number of ways. But when that language starts to take on the characteristic of making students feel unsafe, that's a different story. So I thank you, Ben, for that perspective. I appreciate it. Other thoughts, comments, questions? Parents, feel free to chime in. Any reflections on campus life? Ross, do I see any students? I see a hand right there. Daniel has a question, and then I think there was one in the back.
First,
Daniel,
thank
if
you.
You wouldn't mind introducing yourself?
Oh, sorry, I'm Daniel Ganitsky. I'm a member of the synagogue here, and I'm an alum of both the college at Columbia '96 and the law school '99. And I've been able to talk to administrators at both the college and the law school. The law school seems to be attentive. The college seems not to care about anything that is said to them. And I know that there's been a new dean and a new president at the university in the last year. Do you think the current administration, both of the college and of the university, are less supportive of Hillel and other initiatives of relating to the Jewish community?
I personally don't work as closely with the administration as my colleague Brian does. So I apologize. I can't even answer that question. I'm not sure. I apologize.
Thank you.
Sorry.
Did you have a question? Ross, we've got someone passed, there's a mic. Hold on one second, sir. We'll get to you in 1 second. Over there, just raise your hand. Yep.
Thank you. So I teach at Columbia. I teach in the bioethics program. And I don't know if Rabbi Fein had seen a letter that was circulated among faculty. Maybe about 400 faculty signed it, where they said, we who signed this letter, I signed it too, have a wide variety of views about how to resolve what's going on over there, but we're unanimous in condemning the kind of massacre that Hamas perpetrated, and we are rather shocked that some of our colleagues tried to justify that. So there, and among the signatories were a lot of very distinguished Columbia faculty, and President Shafiq, who's obviously from Egypt, and I guess nominally a Muslim, did issue a statement condemning anti-Semitism. Right, so I mean, the administration is not, well, and they suspended 2 of the pro-Palestinian organizations on campus for not observing the rules. Right. So I'm sure as Rabbi Fein knows, it's a very complicated environment there.
It is, and I know many students were grateful to see that letter that you signed, and it is so complicated, and it's so much more complicated than I think any headline also can give us. That's one of the things that I've also heard from a lot of students who have said to me, actually, my friends are being very, very supportive, but that's not an interesting headline, and that's not going to end up anywhere. So none of this is to say this is every single student's experience at Columbia. This is every single student's experience at Barnard. This is just what I personally have been hearing from students. And there have been, at least I have experienced a lot of moments of hope also, of our community really coming together, people really rallying around each other. There have been a lot of students who are not Jewish who have been coming to Shabbat dinners because their friends have invited them, or their friend is giving a Dvar Torah at services, and then they come to dinner after that. So it is certainly not all doom and gloom by any means, and there are a lot of bright spots and moments of joy.
So I remember in my time at JTS, before Hillel moved to where they are now, it was in Earl Hall, right? And Earl Hall had all the sort of religious groupings, if I'm not mistaken. Was that where some?
Yeah.
So how have you felt supported by other religious groups on campus? Have they been in touch with you? Have they been supportive? Have they reached out?
I personally, so my colleague Rabbi Fein works with the religious groups on campus. I apologize that we have so many different staff members, so I can't answer all the questions about the university stuff. So I can't speak to that as much. I will say personally, I did work very closely with the priest when I was at Syracuse, and he texted me on October 7th to check in, and I really appreciated that.
That's nice. What would a good response from the university look like?
That's a good question. To me, it would look like not just a response in terms of an email that was sent out to people, but actually listening to students, sitting with students, hearing what's going on, and professors making any changes in classes that need to be made as a result of that. To me, a response would also look like responding not just to this specific moment of Israel at war and what's going on in Gaza, but would also respond more broadly to what I see happening, which is a lot of people, not everybody, but a lot of people descending deeper and deeper into these echo chambers, whether it's an algorithm on social media or what the type of news that they are consuming, or the clubs and conversations they're having with friends or classes they're taking. I think that there's been a lot more fragmentation that I've seen on campus. A lot of students have told me that they're really upset by what their friends are saying, and they feel like they can't talk about it with their friends, and that would end the friendship. And so to me, a response would also be something that really gets at the interpersonal relationships in all of this, how we can hold multiple truths at one time, how we can actually seek truth, how we can civilly disagree with each other and still be friends, still work together, still sit together in classes, and make sure that everyone, like you're saying, college is about being uncomfortable in many ways, and that's how we grow and that's how we push ourselves, but feeling unsafe is totally different. And so I personally would like to see a response that gets at how we communicate in a way that holds multiple truths and sees each other as people.
Thank you. Any other? Yes. Stand up and introduce yourself, please.
Hi, I'm Nikki Kagan. My son goes to Georgetown. I actually have two things I want to say. One, Georgetown doesn't have a Hillel because it's a Jesuit university. They have a rabbi, actually, who's on staff. So my son is into the Chabad because that's where, I guess, the cooler people are or whatever. But so Georgetown hired this woman who was supposedly an incredible anti-Semite, and I got a text from the Chabad rabbi because they put her on hold immediately once they found out. And the Chabad rabbi wrote me, "Isn't this great? Georgetown acted so quickly." And I was thinking, yeah, that's great. And then I spoke to my husband. He said he wrote the dean. I go, oh, about what? He said, chastising him. I said, chastising him? Everyone was saying how great Georgetown is. And he said, how did she get hired? Didn't they do any background check? And it's just interesting because I didn't even think of that. And he goes, now she'll sue, now she'll get money and all this, and where was the background check? But the other question I have for you, and I haven't, and really to all the young people who are there, I haven't been to any of these Palestinian protests. Maybe I make myself feel better thinking this, that a lot of these young kids, it's the cause du jour. It's about the haves versus the have-nots. And it's really not about these kids hating Jews. And like what percent are, and also, I've also heard that a lot of these protesters don't even go to the campus. In Georgetown, my son claimed that all the protesters, Palestinian, did go to the campus. But I was just wondering, do you feel that a lot of these people who are protesting against Israel, it's because they just believe, Israel has, these people don't have, it's not really about hating Jews. So I was just wondering your thoughts on that.
Yeah, and I'd also be curious to hear from any students in the room on this as well. There are also a lot of Jewish students who are part of these Free Palestine movements on campuses. And so, for example, at Columbia, when Students for Justice in Palestine was suspended for the rest of the semester, it was in conjunction with Jewish Voice for Peace, who they worked very closely with. And I think a lot of the people who are posting things on social media and saying certain things or saying they don't want to go in the Hillel building or whatever it is, it's really comes from a lack of ignorance. I don't think people genuinely, want to make their friends feel unsafe or make their classmates feel unsafe or make the campus feel unsafe for anybody else who goes there. I think the vast majority of people are really trying to stick up for values that they believe in and don't know a lot or don't know anything about the conflict, have never traveled to the region, have never learned about it, and I think that's what makes it a lot more complicated when certain people are tied to this because of identity, and then others are posting or saying things that they've just never had an opportunity to learn about.
So do you think that's half the people who are protesting? I mean, what? People, do you feel that these people really hate Jews who you see your friends protesting for Palestine? Like the young people who are...
I think it's hard to tell, Mickey.
Yeah, I guess.
And I will tell you that at Columbia, at least, the protesters that are on campus are Columbia students because I want to go to some of these protests sometimes with my daughter, and she's like, you need to have a college ID to get on. They'll lock the campus down. They've done it at least 3 times since October 7th, where you can own 5 times? Thank you. I said at least. Thank you for that. I couldn't get on campus even if I tried.
So the whole thing that I heard that, they're importing people to come.
No, not at Columbia and Barnard.
Yeah, not at Columbia and
Right?
Barnard,
Yeah.
but it does happen at other places.
Yeah.
Sorry?
I want to, hold on. I want to go to a student.
But it does happen out like on Broadway. There will be other people who are not.
Right. There was a rally the other night on Broadway outside the gates. I think we have time for one more, and then we'll see if it's another student. Maybe we'll take another one.
Thank you.
The cantor will get upset if I don't stop soon. So, go ahead.
Thanks. My name is Niso. I'm a senior at Duke University. I'll share, 2 things. With regard to my personal experience, it's been good, which is, I think I'm in the minority of Jewish students who have felt that their university has kind of handled the situation properly, and I'm here with my sister who goes to Cornell, so I don't take that for granted, let's say. I'll share an anecdote. So Duke has a Students for Justice in Palestine chapter. I think they have about 3 members. So we did have a situation on our campus where when they wanted to hold a protest, they had to hire buses to bring students from UNC Chapel Hill to come on Duke's campus. So that exists, for what it's worth. My question, as much as I've been happy to be a student at Duke right now, I have noticed 2 issues with regard to Jewish students and their engagement. They seem kind of the opposite, but I think they're very connected. The first is apathy. I think there's a lot of Jewish students who before October 7th, just didn't care that much about Israel in the first place, feel that it's a problematic territory, something that can create more enemies than friends, and so when things get even more heated, they're more likely to be apathetic, right? To not go to any protests, to just sort of, push that side of their identity as far away as they can so that they can just, keep being comfortable at their places. And the second issue is, and I think this is true on both sides of this issue and on every issue, that the loudest voices are often sort of the least nuanced. And so I have had an issue at Duke where, you know, the sort of most pro-Zionists with their megaphone kind of students are not sort of introducing and sharing a perspective that has a lot of nuance and complexity. And I think that creates an issue where if you're a slightly apathetic Jewish student and you kind of see this voice and you feel, oh, it's not so complex, doesn't really represent me who's confused, conflicted, just wants to learn more, that will push many more Jewish students away. So curious if you've seen that at Columbia or what you think generally on campuses in general, sort of how to reckon with those two issues.
And if I could just tweak it in a way that can lead us to wrap up, how do you help students see that nuance, right? I mean, that's your work as well,
Yes,
right? Yeah,
100%. No, thank you for bringing that up. We have seen that, and there have been a few different instances of that specifically that I'm thinking of, and I think we have been trying to give students an opportunity to learn more by bringing in more speakers who are nuanced, and that nuance around this learning has always been part of what Columbia Barnard Hillel is about, especially around Israel. So that actually doesn't feel new for us for this specific time. But I think that's part of the broader issue too, is that a lot of students feel like, maybe I don't know, I know that this is nuanced, but I don't know what those nuances are, and I don't understand the gray area, and therefore I feel like I cannot have a voice or I cannot have a stake in this at all. And I think that's also not a danger, but I think it could be, but I do think it could be harmful. That I hope that students who also feel like, okay, well, I don't know all the details of the history to this, I hope that people will seek out opportunities to learn, and also will still be honest about how they're feeling, what they are going through, and what they want to learn more about, what their questions are. Like next week's Parsha, we are reading all about the word Israel, the name Israel that Jacob is given, meaning to actually struggle with God. And we're talking about this struggle, and we're talking about these questions. And that is the moment that we find ourselves in right now. And I think that just as the name Israel gives us the struggle that we are as a people, that we've been through for thousands of years, it also gives us that opportunity going forward to ask questions and to seek out something much bigger together with collective courage and collective wisdom.
Rabbi Fein, I wish I could tell you that our lives are going to go back before October 7th in terms of the work we're doing, but I think that this is very much a marathon and not a sprint, and the work that Columbia Barnard Hillel is doing is just extraordinary, as is the work that is happening on all of the campuses, trying to meet the needs of the students in a multiplicity of ways. It's not just your Hillels. At the beginning of this, we held a number of Zoom calls for college students. Our phones continue to ring. We continue to get emails. We are here for you, all of the clergy, to help you navigate these conversations, provide resources, advice to speaking to professors, deans, et cetera, and hope that you will continue to utilize the sources that we provide and also that your campus Hillel provides as well. Rabbi, I want to thank you for joining us.
Thank you, Rabbi.
And it's great
Thank
to
you,
see
everybody.
you. I wish you and your family a Shabbat Shalom, a happy Thanksgiving to all. I hope you had a wonderful holiday. We're going to take a pause for about 10 to 12 minutes, and then we'll start with Kabbalat Shabbat at 6:15. Shabbat Shalom, everyone.